Hey everyone, RogueGold here, and today I wanted to jump into the Dark Zone and just have a bit of a chat. Now, we've previously talked a lot already about Project Resolve, which is of course the upcoming big health update that they're doing to the game with Season 3 in about 3 weeks now. People have their thoughts on this thing overall, whether or not they like the individual changes that are being made, and as I've said before, that's everybody's own decision to make, whether or not you're a fan of what they're proposing or not. Well, we got our first rogue already, here we go. But one thing that I've seen in particular... Oh, these guys are in a group. Oh, boy. Alright, talking in the middle of a PvP fight. That always goes well, doesn't it? What I've noticed in particular is that a lot of people seem to either be confused or they just have straight out said they don't understand what the devs' intentions are with this overall change and update that is happening, right? And so what I wanted to do today, to me, it makes a lot more sense than I think some people are saying. And so what I figured might be interesting to talk about is, from my perspective, what the whole intention is really behind Project Resolve and where the game is headed in the long term. And this also ties in with what's happening with like the Brooklyn DLC, right? I've seen a lot of people say they think that is going to be the last big content for the game, and I don't necessarily agree. So I kind of want to go over all of that today, and we'll see if I can even survive this fight to begin with before we head in there. Pop one more kit. I'm about to have my Catharsis heal. If I can take at least one of them out, that would help. I also logged onto the game like 5 minutes ago, so I'm definitely not warmed up. This is going great. Got one. Not going to be able to get both, though, I fear. Unless I can use the heal. No! I'll take one, though. That's fine. Alright, I moved a little bit away so I can talk in peace, at least for the beginning here. So, yeah, we're going to talk about all that. What I do want to say off the bat is, of course, I don't know any of what I'm about to say with certainty, right? I don't work for Ubisoft. I don't know what the Division 2's strategy or long-term plan is. But I do cover this stuff pretty extensively, so I like to think that I have a pretty good understanding of what's, going on with all of this. But yeah, this entire video is just my own thoughts and opinions, and of course, I would love to hear yours on the whole matter down below. So I think a good place to start is expanding on the concept, at least one that I've kind of come up with, that there are really two kinds or two phases to a live service looter shooter like The Division, right? The first is the controlled phase, as I would call it, and that is the phase where a looter shooter is still actively being developed, right? It's getting content, there's updates coming out, there's people working on it, right? And that's where you'll see stuff like a regulated economy, right? The developers are trying to maintain a good balance with the materials you get, with the cost to upgrade your gear. They're trying to make it that more curated experience. They also regularly monitor difficulty levels. There's balancing done in these various updates to try and create some semblance of a fair, quote-unquote, experience across the game. I would say a very accurate representation of this phase would be the Division 1 between its launch and update 1.7, right? Throughout those various updates, changes were made to try and enhance the overall experience, get that level of balance that the developers wanted to see in terms of the economy, in terms of the difficulty, all of that stuff. And I'm sure some people would say their preference is to have less developer control when it comes to that stuff, and again, that's preference, that's totally fine. But I think for these kind of mainstream looter shooter games, like Destiny, like The Division, that is typically what the developers like to try and achieve the most, because it helps them incentivize more playtime, all of that stuff, and at the end of the day, that's what they're trying to do with these kinds of games. So that's the first type, and then the second type is what I would call more of the fun phase. And for some games, maybe this is what they try and achieve the entire time. They don't care as much about the regulation, they don't care as much about all that stuff, they just want to have a game where players can go nuts and do what they want. But again, I would say that is typically not what you see from these like mainstream AAA looter shooters. But for example, you saw this with the Division 1's 1.8 update. This is the phase where the developers know that things are either slowing down or ending as far as live content production. And so their thought process goes from, let's create this heavily curated experience, and they just say, let's let them have fun. Let's let them go wild and do stuff that they haven't been able to do before, or increase the rate at which they can earn stuff that was previously harder to get. Oh boy, these guys are back again. About to go into another 1v2. But in 1.8, you saw this very clearly. I think a good example is classified gear, right? They introduced gear that I know this came in 1.7 as well, but 1.8 is really where they doubled down on it. Classified gear was statistically much stronger than any other gear you could get in the game, and it made players very much want to participate in those global events and all the other stuff to get it, because it made running through PvE content much easier. It was almost required to play PvP. But once you had those sets, you felt like you had so much more power, and they also increased, the rate at which you could get stuff from the underground, from resistance with exotics, right? It was just, you can very distinctly tell the difference between previous Division 1 updates and 1.8 when it came to their intention and goal behind the changes they were making. So with those two phases in mind and all that context, looking at the Division 2's life cycle up until Season 4 of the Division 2, which came out in, December of 2020. After that, which was like the very end of the Division 2's original developer team, they lost the ability to regulate the game, right? They no longer had the resources or the manpower to really put out those updates that would maintain the kind of moderation and curation that they might have hoped for. There were, 6 people left on the game, they said at that point, or after that point, before they rebuilt the new team. So yeah, they weren't able to do it anymore. And so ever since then, up until even current day, I would say, we've kind of been in a limbo where there is new content and there is moderation that's coming out, but they've still not really had the resources, or even though they've got more people now, they've just never really been able to get out of that phase that we were in previously to get back to where things were pre-Season 4, from the game's launch up until, Warlords of New York and all of that. Okay, so I wanted to explain that context and all that stuff first. Now put a pin in that, and let's go to a secondary thing, and that's what we're now seeing with Project Resolve. Now, despite what it may look like on the surface and whatever, your impressions might be of Project Resolve, I can say with confidence that and they said this too, like on the stream and on the video if you go and watch what they put up on YouTube, the primary goal of Project Resolve is not any of the changes they're making to the front end of the game or the gameplay. It is primarily an update focused on improving the back-end infrastructure, the coding, the PC crashes, things like that. Now look, I don't know how much we're going to see that. Like, if this comes out and then all the following updates are like double or triple in terms of quality and in the less amount of issues that we're going to see when they come out, that would be fantastic. I don't know if we're going to see that, but from the developer's perspective, from what they've said, this update and Project Resolve was necessary in order for them to achieve a better point of development for these future things that they're going for. Now, in my mind, coming back to that idea of the 2 phases of a looter shooter that I was talking about, I view Project Resolve as a step 1 of 2 for them to actually be able to return to and achieve that control phase of the game once again. Project Resolve is step 1. They get a better handle on the game's code, the updates that are coming out, everything like that. And then I see step 2 as the endgame redesign that we know is coming later in 2024 with Year 6 Season 2. Because they've announced pretty clearly that update is going to allow them to, as they say, redesign the endgame. They can kind of change around what endgame rewards are given out where, the efficiency of things, the value of different content compared to other activities. And so when you view Resolve and that endgame redesign in that kind of 2-step plan, I think then when you look at the Brooklyn DLC, which comes out the update after the redesign in early, presumably 2025, then by the time we reach the Brooklyn DLC, we should more or less be back to that regulated status of a looter shooter, back to that control phase. And that is why, in my opinion, again, it's all my opinion, you're seeing them not pull back on stuff like the gear lock, even though it's gotten a lot of negative reception among the community, right? Prior to 2023, the Division 2 didn't have a fixed endpoint. They were continuing content with the funding and resources that they were able to get, which was not a lot, but they were still doing what they could. But once the Division 3 was decided upon, which, I've seen a lot of people say that they still believe that Division 3 has been in the works a lot longer than 2023 and that it's coming out, like in 25 or whatever. As I said at the start, I can't say any of this with certainty, but I would highly advise you believe that Division 3 was not a thing before last year. But anyway, once it became a thing, the whole goal of continuing the Division 2 fundamentally changed, right? The Division 2 now has the responsibility of carrying the mainline status and brand of this franchise until it is time for the Division 3 to come out, which again, in my opinion, is several years from now. And lo and behold, as soon as that was greenlit, pretty much, you saw them switch from the more, loosey-goosey kind of in that limbo state I was talking about of what kind of looter shooter they were trying to be, towards them shifting back towards that control phase. And so coming back to the gear lock, you know, a lot of people are saying, you know, why would they go forward with this if so many people are against it? Well, you know, as harsh as this sounds, it's most likely because I mean, we know for a fact that the Division 2 is still getting quite a lot of new players coming in, which is, you know, great for the game, and it's impressive this late in its life. But as harsh as this sounds, they know that they can lose a few veterans if that's really going to be their sticking point to leave the game, because they'll recoup it in the number of new players that are joining on in probably not that long of an amount of time. And, you know, if that one change helps them ensure a more, like I said, regulated and moderated experience with future content releases, like how we saw hot swapping used in the Paradise Lost Incursion, that's probably a sacrifice they're willing to make, since they know that this game is going to continue on for quite a while and be the centerpiece for Division content. And so that all brings us back to something I mentioned at the start, which was the Brooklyn DLC, and how a lot of people I still see believe that that is going to be the final major content for the Division 2. I would bet a decent sum of money that that will not be the case. I mean, they practically already confirmed this. They tweeted out on, what was it, I have it here, December 13th. They said Project Resolve will help close out Year 5 and set a solid foundation for the Division 2 in Year 6 and beyond. And beyond. We know the Brooklyn DLC is coming out at the end of Year 6 in Year 6 Season 3, so for them to say and beyond, yeah, they pretty much already said that there's going to be stuff beyond the Brooklyn DLC. In my opinion, and again, I emphasize this is all my own viewpoint on things, my own speculation, I view the Brooklyn DLC as a springboard for them to get back into the more regular content cycle. I think after that releases, we're going to see a 2 to 3 year period of yearly DLC releases. I bet they'll do one a year from when the Brooklyn DLC releases, and I bet that updates are going to be a bit more consistent and just more reliable in terms of their stability, thanks to Project Resolve. Because the bottom line is the devs are no longer taking things one step at a time and just seeing how long they get to go and what content they get to make, like we saw in Year 4. They now know that the Division 3 is coming down the line, and I guarantee you that once that happened, the focus went from, let's just see how long we can keep the Division 2 going and keep it popular, to this is now going to be what carries the franchise onward. Primarily, again, we do have spin-offs coming, but Division 2 is still the main line until Division 3 is ready, which, like I said, I believe is still several years out. And so once that happened, they started making decisions with the knowledge that they have relatively secured funding for the next, you know, let's say 4 years. Because they want to make that transition successful from the Division 2 and its current player base to the Division 3. And just as happened with the Division 1, I can almost guarantee you that in the last year of Division 2 leading up to Division 3, you're going to see an update come out just like 1.8 did for the Division 1, where they then transitioned the Division 2 from that more controlled environment and that controlled phase back to the fun phase. I don't know if they'll bring in classifieds, but they'll do something to where it's a lot easier to farm gear. You can maybe get some new power that's a lot of fun, right? They'll do probably a very similar type of thing. So I don't know, guys. In general, that's kind of my outlook on the future of the Division 2. Again, I've seen a lot of people recently saying they don't really understand what the goal of Project Resolve is, thinking that the Brooklyn DLC is going to be the last big thing for this game. I just don't think that's the case. As I said at the start, I do not know that. This is all my own theories and predictions and understanding based off of what I've seen, but I could be totally wrong. Maybe we'll find out that the Brooklyn DLC is actually the end and that they have something else in mind while we wait for the Division 3, but I don't think that's the case. I think the Division 2 is their plan to keep things going for many more years, and I do think the more and more we go on, the more you're going to see them return to that more consistent content cadence, and they're going to continue to tighten their grip a bit on the regulation and the moderation of the experience, as that tends to be what the goal is for these AAA live service looter shooters. So those are my thoughts on the matter, but I would love to hear yours, whether or not you were swayed at all by what I shared in this video. Let me know what you think of Project Resolve and everything else that we have coming up for the Division 2. How do you think they're going to handle the transition eventually from the Division 2 to 3? Is it going to continue on for all those years? Are they going to just leave it and let us have a bit of a break maybe in between the two games? Let me know. Once again, I hope you enjoy these more live commentary type of videos. They're fun to make and I enjoy doing them, so definitely expect to see more. But that's going to do it for me today. Everybody, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. RogueGold. Ow.